I had the opportunity, some of you guys might have seen it in the paper, I've already been in a big discussion at our table about the SU-30MKI. MKI stands for, I is for Indian. The MK is the Russian designation for, it was the SU-30M, that's the Russian designation for their newest fighter. The K means it's an export version, and I means it's for the Indians. These were version 5 airplanes. They had vector thrust, canards. They had all the advanced weapons that the Russians build, to include the Amramsky, if you will, their active radar missile, and then their 10 Delta, which is a IR missile that has a 30-mile range on it. That's out of Jane's magazine. Trust me, I won't say anything classified. Everything I tell you, you can read in Jane's about these airplanes. And we had them here. We also had them up at Mountain Home for 2 weeks, where we trained with them to teach them how to fly out of red flag. And a couple of things happened there. First off, we realized the Tamansky engines that are in those airplanes are very susceptible to fog and foreign object damage. Now, the reason that's a big deal is they have to take 1 minute spacing for takeoff. Well, in a red flag, where we're launching, 60 to 80 airplanes, if you got somebody that's going to get out there and take 1 minute between airplanes to launch 6 airplanes, you go, yeah, right, go find someplace else to fly. So we trained with them, and we worked with them and got them to shorten that down to about 45 seconds. Still not acceptable, but what we did is we said, okay, you're going to launch the first guys out, and we're going to send you out to the airspace, and you can hold and wait for everybody else, because they did carry a lot of gas, and they could do that. And that's what they did. They were very concerned about FOD and the fact that the Russian engines are not nearly as reliable as Americans. One of the things the Indians were very disappointed in is when they fought an engine out, the Russians make them send the engine back to Russia, and then they'll send them a new one. And they do all the work themselves back in Russia on the engine. So, not the perfect situation for them being here in the United States with no spare engines. How did they fly? Well, I think the best way to describe it is give you some stuff, because I know there was something in the newspaper, I guess today, and I didn't see it, but there was a lot of stuff in a lot of the aviation journals. There's going to be a whole lot more about this airplane, about how good it is. If you like to go on the computer and look at YouTube, there's a great demo that somebody has put together where they take the F-22 Raptor and they show it flying its demonstration, and then they have the demo pilot for the SU-30MKI do its demonstration, and he does the same exact demonstration as the F-22. And in an air show, they can do the same demonstration. The reality is that's about as close as the airplanes ever get. When you compare it to U.S. airplanes, where does it stand up against the F-16 and the F-15? It's a tad bit better than we are. And that's pretty impressive. It has a better radar, it has more thrust, and it's got vector thrust, it's got longer range weapons, so it's pretty impressive. Now, the one thing you have to add into that is training. Well, let me throw in the F-22. It's up here. Okay, next. Maneuvering, 1v1 fighting. We had the opportunity to do a lot of 1v1 fighting with it. And we were very concerned because in Cope, India's, where we went over to India and fought them, they always had their best pilots. We always fought them at their Nellis, and they always had their best pilots flying it. We always had an operational unit either out of Kadena or Misawa, where the experience ratio, there was 80% inexperienced guys, less than 500 hours flying time, and 20% experience. That 20% experience was normally guys that had been on staff jobs and come back, so they really hadn't had a lot of time flying. And they went over there, and we kind of held their own, but the Indians pounded their chest and said, look, we were able to beat them more than they beat us. And that was true over there. Well, they come to Mountain Home, and they brought a regular operational SU-30 unit with an experience level of about 50-50. And their experienced guys all came out of the MiG-21 Bison. The MiG-21 Bison is a pretty neat airplane. It's a MiG-21 that a lot of you guys remember from the Vietnam era, except for that they put F-16 radar built by the Israelis in the nose, and they carry the active radar missile, and then they carry an Israeli jammer on it that makes them practically invisible to our legacy. And when I say legacy, I'm talking fondly about the F-15 and F-16 radar. And if you remember the days of the 4477th, and we had Gale Peck and those guys talk to us about the 4477th, the MiG-21 had the capability to get in the scissors with you at 110 knots at 60 degrees nose high, go from 10,000 to 20,000 feet. Very maneuverable airplane, but it didn't have a lot of good weapons. Well, now it has a helmet with the high foresight Archer, it has an active radar missile, and it has a jammer which gets it to the merge. So that's where their experienced pilots came out of to the SU-30, and they felt that they were pretty good in the engaged fight. Well, they get up to Mountain Home, and we show up there, and we didn't really weigh it too much. We let the operational guys fight, but then a couple of the patchwear and IPs went out and played some too with it. And amazingly, we dominated. And we dominated not with a clean F-15, i.e. no wing tanks or any of that. We dominated with an F-15 and wartime configuration, i.e. 4 missiles on board, wing tanks on board. Now the gas was out of the wing tanks, and they're sitting there in their SU-30s that are clean except for the pylon that didn't have anything on it to carry an ACMI pod. They were amazed. Matter of fact, they were floored to the point after the first 3 days, they said, you know what, we don't need to do any more of this 1v1 stuff. Let's move on to something else. And we were amazed because in India, they wanted to do nothing but 1v1 because they were winning in that. Real quick on the airplane, vector thrust. In the Raptor that has vector thrust, it's two-dimensional, but it works in the pitch mode. So when the airplane pulls, and it gets past a certain AOA, it's not an airspeed, it's an AOA limit, post-stall maneuvering, then the vector thrust kicks in and it drives the airplane around. In the SU-30, what it has, instead of having two-dimensional in the pitch, they have it on a V. So if you're looking at the rear end of the airplane, the thrust moves like this. And what that does is when they get, and they don't necessarily have to be post-stall maneuvering, they hit a switch on the stick and it kicks in vector thrust. So if the airplane's in a scissors and he wants to go right, instead of kicking rudder, he kicks in the vector thrust and he puts the stick right, and it takes the nozzle, since they're on a V, and it puts it over here and it pushes the airplane around. Now, while that sounds really good and it's great for a lot of thrust, what it does is it creates massive drag. It's a big airplane, a huge airplane. And now it's just taking it and moving it across the sky. So what happens is, while it can move its nose around, it starts sinking. Well, what do? Well, we've been fighting the Raptor, getting our butts kicked, and we go, you know, the only chance you have against the Raptor is when he's in a turn and he's coming around the corner and you have an inexperienced guy, because the experienced guys know not to get there, but the inexperienced guy has got, and this is no shit, 28 degrees per second turn rate at 20,000 feet. The F-15 has an instantaneous of 21, a sustained of about 15 to 16 degrees. The Raptor can sustain 28 degrees. Some of these young guys, that's not enough for them. They want more than that. So they'll come around the corner, and here you are in your Eagle just kind of hoping that he gets scared. You're pointing your nose out here, and he pulls to the point that he goes post-stall maneuvering. Well, once he goes post-stall, the airplane stops moving around the center of lift on the wing, and it goes around the center of gravity up by the nose, because it goes on just thrust, and the SN drops down, and the airplane will rotate like this. Well, in the Eagle or the Viper, when you see that, you immediately go vertical because you know he's not going to be able to go up with you. And you have one fleeting opportunity against the Raptor, and that's it. Now, the real key is you never even get that close to the Raptor because you never see him, and he shoots you before you get there. The SU-30, no problem. Big airplane, big radar cross-section. He's jinking and jiving just to get to the merge, but he's jamming. So yeah, your missiles aren't working, so you get to this visual fight. Well, you roll in on him, and he's got about 22 degrees, 23 degrees per second sustained turn. Nowhere near the Raptor. Well, we've been fighting the Raptor, so we go, yeah, okay, oh, dude, this is easy. So we start to pull in on him, and then all of a sudden you see the ass end kick down, and he starts doing vector thrust, but now he starts falling out of the sky. He's falling out of the sky so fast that you don't even have to go up. You just pull the stick back a little bit, pull the throttles, go to guns, and come in and drill his brains out. And so while on paper, he has vector thrust, he has all these great weapons and everything, he looks the same as a Raptor, he's nowhere near the same as a Raptor. So that was a really good thing for us to find out that we really didn't know until this past exercise happened. Now, what I'm scared of is Congress is going to hear that and they're going to go, great, we don't need to buy any more airplanes, y'all can get those. No. We used to be way ahead of them. Now they've caught up to us and they're really just a little bit, and I say they're a little bit ahead of us because when their pilots learn how to fly the airplane, they'll be able to beat the F-15 and F-16 on a regular basis. Right now, their young guys get too anxious. They go into that post-stall maneuvering where the airplane kicks down, and now they're great. But that's only a matter of time before they learn that don't go there unless you have to. As far as red flag went, we also had the French up here in the Rafale. The French were only going to bring out the Mirage 2000-5, which is one of their older airplanes, until the Indians said they were bringing their newest thing, the SU-30. And then the French all of a sudden said, hey, we're going to bring in the Rafale. And we go, well, you've never brought that to the States before. And they go, yeah, we're bringing it now. And they brought it out, and 90% of the time they followed the Indians in. And when the Indians shot or got shot or whatever, the French took a shot and left. And they never really came to any merges, which anybody that flew with them in Iraq during Desert Storm or during any of the peacekeeping missions, no, what they would do is when the Americans would go and do the peacekeeping act up north, they would stay over Bahrain and down at Al's Garage and fly local sorties and say, yeah, we're participating in the war. What they were really doing is they had all their sensors on, sniffing and seeing how our radars worked. And really, that's all they did out here. Is they came out and they watched the whole fight with their newest airplane and their newest electronic receiving units and sucked up all the trons in the air. The Indians were very disappointed in the fact that well, first off, I got to say, they learned the lessons very well at Mount Home. They were extremely professional. They never flew out of the airspace, which we were very concerned about. They had 0 training rule violations, and that in itself was incredible. We were very impressed, and we thanked them so much because they were very, very professional, and we were concerned they weren't going to be. Where they had problems was they killed a lot of friendlies. And that happened because the first 2 days of red flag, and red flag is different than it used to be. Now, the first week of red flag is basically large force employment like the old red flag was. The second week of red flag is a campaign where the surface-to-air missiles come up, and as you take them out, they start attriting, and you have less and less surface-to-air missiles. Same goes for red air. The first week, red air can regenerate, but we take our time regenerating. We regenerate slowly. The second week, we end up to where you can only regenerate twice, and then if they're killing you a lot, you can only regenerate once, and then you're gone. So it's like a real war campaign. Well, guess what? If you frat the blue side, the blue loses forces that it's allowed to bring to the war also. And their problem was their systems didn't have the combat ID capability. And they were the only people, the French, we had the South Koreans here with brand spanking new F-15Ks. Gorgeous airplanes. They right off the factory showroom floor. They had AESA radars, which is what we have in the F-22, that we sold them in these F-15Ks. They had Israeli jamming pods and Israeli targeting pods on them, and they were incredible airplanes. Now, in the South Korean defense, they were very professional also, but they had maybe 50 hours total in the F-15, no hours in these airplanes. So they were still learning how to fly it, and they did fairly well. But they had no frat. Why? Because they were in the big internet with us, fighter data. The French were in the data link with us. The Koreans were in the data link with us. All the U.S. forces were in the data link. The AWACS was in the data link. The Indians were in their own Russian-made data link. So they're running around with no computer picture of where the fight is. And they're going, and they're yelling to AWACS. They're going, hey, I've got a contact on my nose, 22 miles, friendly or hostile. Well, AWACS comes back and goes, there are no hostiles within 40 miles of you. Fox! You go, no, dude. You know, and they're going, they were just scared to death because in the first 3 days of the war, they had some losses. And they had losses because they were holding their shots, waiting to hear if it was a bad guy or a friendly, and then they were dying. So they go, well, you know what? it's better you die instead of I die. And so they had a fairly high number of fratricides in the second week. And they took it very seriously. They were very concerned because one of the things that they fought for was to come to fly in Red Flag at Nellis. Well, Red Flag at Nellis, set up by all the 4 stars a long time ago, was to form coalitions with guys we were going to go to war with. So we had to be able to fight with these guys. The South Koreans, God forbid the French, the Brits, the Aussies, all these guys, even the Germans, but not somebody like the Indians. The Indians were set to go to Red Flag, Alaska, because that's where General Gregory set up to do PACAF, friendship building and building partnerships. And you go up to Red Flag, Alaska, guess what? The training rules are different. The kill criteria is a little different. Fratricides looked at a little different, you know, because you have all these different countries that are playing that normally wouldn't go to war with us, but we want to be friends with, because there is no 2 countries that border each other in PACAF that are friends. Every single country that borders another country in PACAF has some kind of dispute going on with them. So we're not so concerned about building a lot of coalitions with them. We just want to make them all friends and work together enough so that they're not trying to blow each other up with nukes. So they came, though, to Red Flag Nellis thinking that they were going to be able to mix right in and be a part of the coalition, and they learned in a big way that that wouldn't happen. That's it, guys. That's it in a nutshell. Yes, sir.
Wasn't that ISA radar a big factor in the Indian?
Well, the radar on the SU-30 in the nose of it is not an AESA, it's an ESA. And the difference is an active electrically scanned radar or an electrically scanned radar. And that while it's just one little letter, the A, it's a huge difference because an actively scanned ESA radar goes out and pings more and sees more and is more accurate than just a passively scanned radar, which is good, but ends up having more technical problems in discriminating and finding the right guy.
Now, General Pauling over the Hawaii Air National Guard,
yes, sir,
made a little statement the other day that the F-15 is the last dogfight airplane. He discounted the fact that the F-22 is terrific in the fight, in close.
He did, and I don't know General Pauling, and I don't want to get sideways with him. I got sideways with General Bruins last time, and I don't want to get sideways anymore.
But it's easy. Bruins is tough.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I think the Raptor is the next great dogfighter we have.
Sure.
Now the reason is electronic jamming, but not only electronic jamming. The Raptor, we just don't carry enough missiles. We're going to have to, when the balloon goes up, we're going to have to go in and gun some people. And it's going to happen, and thank God the Raptor still has a gun on it. And it's fast, it's maneuverable, it can get there. And I know my F-16 brethren are going to get a good joke out of this. And Pete, I apologize, but the Block 50 F-16, when it doesn't carry a pod, is a pretty damn good dogfighter also. So those 3 airplanes, the F-15, the Block 50 F-16, and the Raptor, are all still very, very capable, and we're going to need them because that little Bison MiG-21 I talked about earlier, when he gets in unseen, because he's got a small radar cross-section, he's got a big jamming pod, and he gets here to the last minute, and you're maneuvering against this active radar missile that just showed up. Luckily, our RWR sees it, and you go, holy shit, where did that come from? That little son of a bitch, I need to go kill him. Now you're going to need that maneuverability.
What about the F-35? Where's that?
Let's save that for another discussion. Shed and I do a lot of work in the 422, so we know too much about it at this point. But we'll save that one for another time. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I probably went over my 15 minutes, I'm sure.
No, that's...
All right.